StraighTAllDay.com.
You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself. It's going to make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is why most people cannot be trusted with power. Now, when I say power in this sense, I can mean it in the way that most people talk about it, which means having a big influence over other people and being more significant in the eyes of the general population. Right? Most of the time when someone calls a person powerful, usually means they are well known, they have some level of significance in some space, they have a perceived level of influence, and for whatever reason you believe this person can get certain things done that maybe the average person or anyone else simply could not get done for, again, whatever reason. So that's the sense that most people are talking about when they say power. But also mean power in terms of having influence and say over the things that happen in your own life. Most people cannot be trusted with having influence over their own lives, is what I'm saying here. I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by this here today. I'm going to tell you why, while we all want at least the level of power that is personal, meaning control over our own situations, let alone over anybody else, that most people are unqualified to have it. Yes, you heard me correctly. Even though we all want to have power over our own situations, most people are unqualified to have power even over their own situations. And I'm going to explain to you what this means and how somebody could be unqualified to have power over their own situation, which seems to not quite make sense. But of course, as I do every single day on this show, I'm going to make sense of it. Point number one. Today's topic, once again, is why most people cannot be trusted with power. Number one, power is a magnifier. And most people don't have enough of their shit together to where they should even want power. Because you know what power does, ladies and gentlemen? I just told you. Are you listening? Power is a magnifier. All power does is magnify what was already there. You often hear people say this when they're referring to money. People, the same way that I'm using power here, you often hear people analogize this with money. They'll say all money does is magnify you. So if you were a jerk and then you got a whole bunch of money, then you're just going to be a bigger jerk. If you are a good person and then you got a whole bunch of money, then you're going to be an even better person. All the money does is magnify you and who you are, and it takes all the stuff you were already about and it allows you to be even more of that person because now you have the resources to do it. Well, power is also a resource. And all power does is magnify everything in, with, around, and about you. So if you have an unsteady, unstable situation in your life and then you get power, your situation is going to become more steady, more unstable, and more chaotic, which might lead to your demise more than it leads to you fixing anything because you already had chaos. We just give you a whole bunch of power, a whole bunch of money. Now you have more resources with which to be chaotic. That's actually what happens. See, a lot of people think that money and or power can solve all your problems. And the answer is no, it doesn't. All money and power do, it can solve some of your money and power problems, but it will exacerbate all your other problems that have nothing to do with money and power. If you have a problem with, if you have an ethics problem, or you have an honesty problem, or you have an integrity problem, and you get a whole bunch of money, money cannot solve the integrity or ethics or morality problem. All it does is make it more obvious that you have those problems. If you're a drug addict and you are barely getting by with your money, and then you get a whole bunch of money, all you're going to do is become a bigger drug addict, and you might end up dying because now you can afford to buy enough drugs to overdose on and kill yourself. Do you understand? See, this is what power and resources actually do. They just exacerbate everything that you're already about. Now, again, they can solve your problems that are directly related to power and money. So let's just say I wanted to have a TV show on, I want to have, what's the network? I want to have a TV show on NBC. Let's just say I want to get the Work on Your Game Masterclass on NBC, but I can't get it on NBC because I don't have the power and I don't have the reach and I can't get the right people to listen to me. And then somebody hands me $1 billion in cash. Now I can call NBC and say, hey, NBC, you don't even have to hire me for the show. I will pay you $100 million to put the Work on Your Game show on your network for at least one season. They might take the money. They might say, all right, Dre, if you're going to pay us $100 million, you can put your show on our network. So boom, the money just solved my problem of getting my TV show on NBC. Now, would I actually do that? No, the point being If my only problem was I just need money to solve this problem, then money will solve that problem. But if I have other problems that have nothing to do with money, it's only going to make it worse. You understand? So a lot of people get this wrong, thinking if you just got power or money, then all your problems will be solved. Incorrect. Only certain problems will be solved. Everything else is going to get worse. If it's already bad, it's going to get worse. And if it's already good, it's going to get better. When you ascend to power, everything that you were or already are about is magnified. That's what happens. If you were already a jerk, again, you're more of a jerk. You're already clumsy and unorganized, it's going to become even more obvious. If you were already a good person with positive intentions, now you have more resources with which to exercise those intentions. All power does, folks, is 10x or 100x or 1 millionx magnify what already exists. The problem with this is what's already there for a lot of people is not good, which means you don't want these things magnified. All right, you don't want it magnified that you got some problems in your life that need to be fixed that cannot be fixed with money or power. And if you get money and power, then it's going to be more obvious that you have those problems. And you can't hide them anymore because now everybody can see them because now you're under a magnifying glass. You understand? Whatever pieces are missing in your life or are not in proper order, the impact of those missing pieces get multiplied the more influence and control that you have, because again, now you are more visible and everything you do has more impact because of that power. So more of your good stuff shows and more of your bad stuff shows as well. For example, give an example. One of my coaching clients in Work on Your Game University is a high level accountant. Now, she goes into businesses and helps them with their money issues. And as she likes to say, every business has money issues. They just don't know they have money issues. And she was explaining to me how one business that she works with, she talked about how they were trending in the wrong direction when it came to their cash on hand. Keeping it really simple. Specifically, the money that the company actually has, like actual cash. I'm not talking about on your balance sheet, but actual cash that they actually have in the bank. And she was explaining to me and showing me, documenting to me how this company has some issues. Because in their revenue numbers, the quote unquote imaginary money, the stuff on the balance sheet, that number keeps going up, but the amount of actual money they have is going in the opposite direction. So while the company can continue to tout that their revenue is increasing, and according to the numbers she showed me, their revenue is increasing, the problem is the amount of actual money they have access to is decreasing at the same time. So anybody who knows anything about accounting, this kind of stuff happens in businesses all the time. This is how you can see your favorite athlete or entertainer is allegedly making all these millions of dollars, but then they end up going broke. Or how a person says, I made this much money last year, but how am I broke now? Or I'm supposed to have this much revenue in my business, but we don't have any money to pay these bills. How is this possible? It happens all the time. And I just gave you a brief overview of how this happens. You can go read Accounting for Dummies if you want to learn more details of how this works. But generating more money for this business, this is the point I want to make for you. That this business, based on the way it was trending before my client came in and started working with them, based on the way it was trending, if they just kept doing what they were doing and increasing their revenue, which is seemingly what you would think every business wants to do, they would eventually sell themselves out of business. Because all the sales that they're making, i.e. increase in revenue, there will be more demands on what's happening in their business, more demands on all the other pieces of their business. And the more demands that came on, the more obvious it will become that their lack of cash is hurting them. And eventually they get to the point where they have no cash, cannot service their accounts, even though they have revenue, and they would end up going out of business or becoming insolvent, and someone will buy them out from underneath their feet and a bunch of their executives will get fired, even though they're making more money than they were making before. This is how it happens, everybody. I'm giving you this as an example to help you understand that just because you come into power or money does not mean all your problems get solved. It actually means a bunch of your problems are going to get bigger. So that's why you got to fix your shit before you get into more resources and more stuff. Because an increase in power can actually make your situation worse, not better. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is why most people cannot be trusted with power. Number 2, one trade-off of power is that for the price of having massive influence over yourself and events, you also become responsible for the outcomes of those events. Remember what we told you. Everything has a trade-off. Episode 2174, there are no perfect scenarios. Episode 3162, 3 laws of economics. Third law is everything has a cost. One of the costs of having power is that because you now have influence, you are responsible for the outcomes of that influence. Even if you didn't actually do it, people are going to look to hold you responsible for it simply because you're the one with the power. For example, January 6, 2021, a bunch of Donald Trump supporters went to Washington, D.C., went and listened to him give a speech. A bunch of people marched down to the Capitol, and some of those people who marched down to the Capitol broke through barricades, attacked security people, and trespassed into the Capitol building. Did that happen? That happened. Did Donald Trump get fingers pointed at him more than anybody else for what happened that day, even though he personally did not march to the Capitol, did not break any barriers, did not fight security, and did not trespass into the building? He didn't do any of those things, but he got all the blame. Why did he get all the blame? Because he has the power. He got the blame because he has the power, because he has the influence. This is the way it works. When you're a person with power and influence, people will blame you for anything and everything that happens, even if you didn't have shit to do with it. But because you have the power, you're the one who gets the blame. This is the trade-off of having power. In the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association, there is a popular player, a white girl by the name of Caitlin Clark, who comes from, I believe, from the state of Iowa, and she plays for the team in Indiana. And Caitlin Clark, being that she's white, and the WNBA is mostly black players, it created this, I guess, attention drawing, not a guess, but definitely attention drawing, I guess we can call it underlying controversy here about race. Because Caitlin Clark has brought with her a whole bunch of fans, many of whom are white and middle Americans. And then you have a whole bunch of black players in the WNBA, many of whom are black and they are coastal. And it creates this conflict to the point that whenever a black player is claiming that some white fans are mistreating them in any way, and these are women we're talking about here, so this is negative comments on social media or allegedly somebody talked trash to you from the stands in a game. And again, these are females, so let's give them a little bit of grace. They are all pointing at, oh, well, it's Caitlin Clark, the white girls, it's her fans who are doing this. And then people are saying, well, Caitlin Clark needs to say something about this. And why does Caitlin Clark need to say anything? She's not a fan. She's a player. She's not on social media saying anything. She's not in the stands. She's on the court. Why is she responsible? Because she's the person with the power. She's the person with the influence. She's the big name and big face that everybody is allegedly there to see. So they're pinning all the blame on her, even though she's not the one doing any of the things that they're mad about. Or alleging that happened. It's not even mad about alleging that happened. There's a lot of shit didn't even happen. But anyway, we'll talk about that at a later date, maybe. Most people are allergic to the personal accountability of responsibility. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump and Caitlin Clark are the people I'm talking about here. I'm using them as examples. But for all of you who may not be nearly as famous as Caitlin Clark or Donald Trump and may never be, what I'm talking about is that when you come into power, you're responsible for the outcomes of everything that you influence. Are you ready for that? That's an open question. Are you ready for that? Because when you're responsible for the outcomes of everything you influence, again, you're going to find yourself being blamed for shit that you ain't got nothing to do with just because you have power. And again, you can't opt out of this. There is no opt out. You're either in it or you're not. If you don't want to be in it, then you cannot have power. This is the reason why many people can't be trusted with power. That's today's topic. Many people can't be trusted with power because they don't want to take the accountability that comes with it as a package deal. The package deal of power is you are held accountable for everything and anything that has anything to do with the reach of your power, even if you did not mean for it to happen, even if you didn't do it yourself, even if you had nothing to do with it, even if you didn't want it to happen, you're responsible for it. The more power you have, the more things you impact, the more places where your fingerprints will be left, even if you never actually touched it, if you get what I'm saying. Which means if and when something doesn't go the way that you wanted it to go, or that others wanted it to go, everybody points at you and everybody's looking at you, including and especially the people who disagree with the outcome or who disagree with you or have already disagreed with you from the beginning. Again, I gave you an example. Donald Trump. There's a lot of people who already disagreed with Donald Trump. And when January 6, 2021 happened, it just gave them more fuel to point the finger at him. They already didn't like him. But then when that happened, it gave them more reason to not like him. Why? Because he's the person in power for no other reason. For no other, there are other reasons that many people have. I'm sure they can list them right off the top of their heads if I ask them to. But for no other reason, he got the blame just because he's the guy. He's the one that everyone was allegedly there for. So people will point the finger at you just because you're the person in power. If they like you, they'll point the finger at you if you're the person in power. If they don't like you, especially if they don't like you, and they'll add some extra stuff to it while they're at it. See an example of this. Another example. Look at the CEO of any publicly traded company, especially those who are in the public eye. So let's look at a company like Target or Amazon or Apple. All right. These people, they get the finger pointed at them for anything and everything that happens. And remember a few months ago, from the time you're listening to this, there was a shooting where a man, I forget the gentleman's name, but he got shot in broad daylight in New York City. He was the CEO of a healthcare company. And he got shot by this kid named Luigi. I remember the guy's name was Luigi, the shooter. And people were trying to say, ridiculously as far as I'm concerned, but they were trying to say that because this healthcare company, I think it was United Healthcare, because this company has denied claims of certain people and they make it hard for people to get insurance. And I've heard many of the horror stories of dealing with insurance companies. I get it. But because this company has denied people's insurance claims and they make it hard for people to get insurance and they cause all this red tape, because of that, and because this guy's the CEO of that company, it's not like he physically is doing it himself, denying claims or taking phone calls, but because he's the CEO and then that guy went and shot him, there were many people out there positing that it's okay that he got shot because look at what the company that he's the head of, look at the bad things that they do. This is a ridiculous frame to put on anyone, but there are many people who believe it, and it is reflective of what I'm explaining to you. What I'm explaining to you is ridiculous, but it's also true. That this is the way many people think. That when you're a person in power, and also here's another thing you all got to keep in mind. Most people don't have power, and most people do not think they will ever have power, nor do most people want to do anything to try to get power. Most people have no ambition to acquire power. So when they see someone who looks like they have power and they know that they don't have power, guess what? They will easily sit back and put all the accountability on you for their situations, even though you ain't got shit to do with anything that's happening in their lives. Do you not notice this? Do you not see this happen in everyday life? Of course it happens every day. So people say, well, the healthcare industry is bad. There are people who never even worked with this United Healthcare company, but they were happy to see the CEO get shot because they have a healthcare horror story from 10 years ago that had nothing to do with that company. But hey, the healthcare industry is bad, so it's only right that the CEO gets shot. Because grandma didn't get her medicine 3 months ago because of some arcane law that they had in some other company, some other arcane rule that some customer service rep from another company told me about. So it's okay that this CEO of this company who has nothing to do with that got shot. This is how people think, if you even want to call this thinking. But a lot of people believe this. So if you come into power, understand that this is one of the trade-offs. Look at governmental leaders, the president, we already talked about. Look at people in Congress, judges, your local mayor or your local governor. When everything is going wrong, people tend to look at and blame whoever is in charge. CEOs, politicians, the best player on the team, the person with the most money, people will blame you. When people feel like they're not making enough money, who's the first person that they look to blame? They go look to people who look like they are making enough money. No, the reason I'm not making a lot of money is because Elon Musk has $1 billion. So no wonder I'm broke. That makes it all make sense. That makes no sense. But do people believe it? Yes, they do. And they have politicians out there who will cleverly use this against them. This is where you get a guy like Bernie Sanders, who's allegedly fighting the oligarchy that he's been doing for 30 years, a 30-year losing war, but he keeps fighting, allegedly. And the whole point is he's using the frame that is human nature, blame someone who has power, because I don't see myself as having power. He's leveraging that to keep his career going. Smart move by Bernie Sanders. Now, I think he's full of shit, but it's still a smart move at the same time. Both can be true. So when everything is going wrong, people blame whoever's in charge. All right, that's the person with power. You must be responsible because you have power. I don't have power, so I'm not responsible. You hear this there are a lot of black people who even to this day believe that black people, just as a general rule, black people don't have power. Therefore, they can't be racist. They can't be responsible for anything because black people don't have power. I had a black person say this to me on social media just the other day. Black people don't have power, so we can't be racist. That's bullshit. Racism is not based in power. The number one definition of racism is an inherent belief that one race is superior to another by the fact that they are a certain skin tone. That's the first definition of racism. Now, there are like 6 or 7 definitions. One of them is this whole power bullshit. That's a made up definition that got pulled out of nowhere to give black people a cloak of lack of accountability, to just let them feel like they don't have to be held accountable so they can just say or do whatever they want. And this is one of the problems in the black community, but this is a different conversation for a different day. The frame most humans operate by is this one that I'm describing. I don't have power, so I got to blame the person who does, or the person I think has it. And this is what comes with power. A bunch of people who have none and don't want any are going to blame you for their situation. Are you ready for that? If you want power, this comes with it, like it or not. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is why most people cannot be trusted with power. Number 3, power ain't free. Power has a cost. The third law of economics, also Newton's third law of motion, is the law of trade-offs. There is nothing free in the universe, especially things that are valuable and coveted. Anything that you want, there is a cost. And every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And by the way, the more people want a thing, the higher the cost is to get it. Meaning, if you are to achieve power, there is a cost for getting, keeping, and even using that power. Most people want power for cheap. In other words, they want to have it without paying for it. So if your power is given to you by someone else, then that means they could just as easily take it away from you. And they could just as easily take it away from you, and there you are back without power. So that's not real power. Real power is taken. It's not given. For example, if you're a manager at a store, let's say you're a manager at Target. When you walk into the store, you have a certain level of status, influence, and power because you're a manager. And there's a bunch of people there who work there who ain't managers. But because you're a manager, there's a bunch of people there, again, who they don't have that title. They work there. And relative to them, you're somebody. But as soon as you walk out of Target, your status is no longer relevant because your status only matters inside the four walls of that store. So for your status to matter anywhere and not be situational and not be power that is handed to you by somebody, you have to pay the price of achieving status in a way that is real status, meaning you got to pay something. All right, there's no real price to pay to become a manager at Target. I mean, you may have to put some time into your work. You may have to show up with a college degree, but there's no real price to pay. I've been a retail manager before. I was a manager at Foot Locker, my first job out of college. I didn't have to pay any price to become manager. My price was I had to go to a job interview and pass it, and I had to have a college degree, so they fast-tracked me into a manager spot. Why? What sense? What that has to do with being able to sell sneakers? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But that's what I got. So was that real power? No. I had power in the store because I could tell the 2 or 3 workers who were working with me on my shift, I could tell them what to do because I had more power than they did. But outside of Foot Locker, I had no power. As soon as I left that store, even if I had my referee shirt on, I didn't have any power in anybody else because they didn't have to listen to me because they didn't work at Foot Locker. You understand? So it's not easy to get power the organic way, meaning actually paying a price because it costs something. Building power, protecting power, and owning it is not as easy to get it that way as it is to get it the manufactured way, such as being handed a position of status, such as being a manager or a supervisor or a certain job title. Those are powers that are handed to you, which means, again, they can be taken away from you. One is much harder to get and harder to maintain, but that's also why it lasts longer and it has more reach and it has more value because it costs more to get. Do you understand this whole point of trade-offs? And the one that is harder to get is also harder to take away. So the power that I had when I was a manager at Foot Locker dwarfs in comparison to the power that I have now as a business owner. Why? Because the power I have now as a business owner is something that I had to pay a lot more to get, and I had to pay a lot more to maintain than I had to pay to get and keep the power as a Foot Locker manager. And the one that I paid more for is worth more, and it's harder to take away. It can't be stripped from me. You can't really take this power away from me unless I decide to just drop it, but you can't take it. When I worked at Foot Locker, the power could be taken. My boss could fire me, and there goes my power that fast. But nobody can fire me where I'm at now. That's why the power is more valuable. Everybody understand? And also, the reason nobody can fire me is because of the price that I paid to put myself in the position to where nobody can fire me. That's the trade-off. Recapping today's class, which is why most people can't be trusted with power. Again, I can mean power in a way that most people talk about it, which is having influence, but also mean power over yourself and your situations. Number one, power is a magnifier, and most people don't have enough of their shit together to where they actually want their shit magnified, because you would have some things magnified that you really don't want magnified if you really thought about it. Number two, one trade-off of power is that for the price of having this influence, you are also responsible for the outcomes of those events, even if you had nothing to do with them. There's a bunch of people who want to hold you responsible just because you are who you are and because you have power, and most people don't see themselves as having any. So if you look like you have some, people will gladly blame you. Number three, power is not free. Remember, there's a cost to everything, ladies and gentlemen. Newton's third law of motion is trade-offs. There is no such thing as free in the universe, especially things that are valuable and coveted, and every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So the action of acquiring power has the reaction of people blaming you because you have power. Yes, that's the way it works. It does sound silly, but that's the way it works. All right, you can accept it, you cannot accept it, but I guarantee you it's there. You're a manager at a Target. As soon as you walk in the store, you have power. Why? Because you're the manager at Target. As soon as you walk out of the store, you no longer have power. You go back to being a nobody. That's manufactured power. You want real power, you got to pay a real price. Again, everything has a cost. So if you didn't pay, but you still feel like you have power, then you don't have real power. Simple as that. People who have true power pay the price for that power, and you can tell by the way they move, the way they conduct themselves, and the way they talk that their power is real, as opposed to the power of someone whose power is manufactured. Now, they may be able to put on airs, and with a certain audience, they can get away with it. When they come across someone like myself who will call them out on their bullshit, they tend to not want to engage with people like me. You can decide why that is. So I just told you, as a matter of fact. All that said, folks, workonyourgameuniversity.com. You want to work with me directly. You want to develop real power. You want to learn what that price is. You want to actually pay it. We want to mitigate how hard those costs are to pay while still building something real and substantial that lasts for you, your family, and your people that you're called on to serve. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Have me as your direct coach, and let's get to it. Work on your game. Dre all